Look, staying healthy isn't easy. Watching your diet, hitting the gym, avoiding stress. But a good night's rest helps boost your overall health and wellness. And it couldn't be easier. The new Sleep Number 360 Smart Bed is the only bed that effortlessly adjusts and responds to both of you. The result? You wake up ready for anything. Proven quality sleep is life-changing sleep. And now, the new Queen Sleep Number 360 P5 Smart Bed is only $17.99. Save $600. Only for a limited time. To learn more, go to sleepnumber.com.
No one can jump inside you and put you back together. You need to pick up those broken pieces and find the shapes that they all fit together in. And it might be a brand new shape. It might not have been what was smashed in the first place, but you can put it back together.
My name is Halina Rafai, and this is the A Sonic Hug podcast. Over the coming months and episodes, you will hear the voices of people from different walks of life who deal, experience, and battle mental health issues. Rosie and I have known each other for a few years now. We have worked on music projects together and have had some conversations around mental health. She's a ray of sunshine, and her drive is beyond comprehension at times. In this podcast, she talks about alcoholism, grief, self-destruction, and how that has all led in ways to profound anxiety and depression for her over the years. This is Rosie's story.
I am Rosie Banns. I'm a musician, songwriter, and music producer from Glasgow. From the very beginning, from being a tiny little child, I have struggled with anxiety, very visceral, body shaking anxiety. And that's been my number one companion over the years. I grew up in a household with an alcoholic. So my mum was an alcoholic, very functional as well. So that sort of came out in my behaviour as a child, in very anxious behaviour, because the household was insecure. It was hard to know what version of my mum I would get. So I think I went down the sort of, instead of rebelling against it, a bit more of the caregiver role, which meant I absorbed a lot. And so that came out in a lot of anxiety, a lot of worry. I would worry about things. Even I remember worrying, even when I was really, really small, playing with dolls and worrying about the dolls having a house tomorrow, and oh no, what if I lose one of her shoes, and crying about really silly things like that. But looking back, that was kind of how my anxiety manifested, I think, at that age. So she was a very emotional woman, and she was depressed. She was totally depressed. She had unfortunately suffered the loss of a child before. So there's four of us in the family. I've got an older brother who's 10 years older than me, and a little sister who's 2 years younger. So there's 12 altogether. And right in the middle was a girl that a child that my mum lost. I think that I was the next girl to come along, and I feel like my mum spent a lot of time sort of giving me attention when she was drunk, but perhaps making up for the lost child that she had a little bit. We both had the same name as well, which I didn't find out until I was a bit older. So the kind of things she would do would be, she would get drunk quite late at night. So she would do daytime sober, and then in the evening, late evening and through to 2, 3 in the morning, she would listen to music, very loud, lots of Bon Jovi, and she would sing, and she would get dead kind of jolly, and then the time of the night would come and she would crash hard, emotionally crash. And that's where I would get taken out my bed. She would come into the room and physically scoop me up and take me into the living room and sort of cuddle me and cry and basically tell me her worries. But, this was very, very young. So I always say, looking back, I see it I was her teddy bear. I was a soother. I was something, I was a place that she could go to kind of pacify how she was feeling. And obviously as a kid, it's hard to, you don't know what's going on. So I just have, my mum loves me, you know, this is how you show love to people, almost like intensely suffocate them maybe, or you kind of keep control of them as well. And so when that goes away, particularly the next day when I wake up and it's a whole different version of my mum, whether she remembers what happened the night before or not, that made me feel anxious about, well, where is that love now? Does that mean I've done something wrong? What can I do to get that love back? And yeah, I think that just resulted in a really anxious and insecure like pain within me. So that's like kind of one of the things that she would do quite often. And I felt quite singled out by her with that as well, because I've got two big brothers and 5 years older and 10 years older, as I said, and they didn't get that kind of treatment. I don't know if it's like girl, because I'm her first daughter as well. So as the years went on, my anxiety remained a total mystery to me. It was something that I never even considered being an issue. I just was always very motivated and always had a lot of movement about me. I was always quite jittery, but it came out in action. So as a young teenager, I was up and about, I was doing things, I was meeting people, I was making music, and on the outside of my life, I would get positive responses. I would get told, you know, oh, you've got loads of energy, you're a firecracker, you've got loads of confidence. Inside, it was coming from a place of pure need for validation, and that need to constantly feel love and not actually knowing how to get it because of the way my mum showed it. It didn't make any sense as a kid, and as a young teenager, I still didn't understand it. As I kind of went through the years, like I said, I was so blind to this being a thing. I didn't know about anxiety. I didn't know about mental health. My dad was a very passive person. My mum was very dominant. So through those years, I didn't really see him that much. We have a good, strong relationship now, but back then it was, I didn't have that other parent to bounce anything off. So at the age of 19, my mum passed away really quickly, and it was an autoimmune disease as well, which I didn't know anything about. So the more we sort of looked into it, the more I realised, well, this could have been because of lifestyle. And that was literally my first instance of being aware of mental health, was like, why did my mum die so fast? And then, like, honestly, it's crazy when I think back and think of who I am, the person I am now. But I didn't even know that she was an alcoholic for 19 years of my life. I didn't even know that that's what was going on. So yeah, that was a real pivotal moment. And I do kind of slightly split my life up into two, kind of pre-mum passing away and post-mum passing away, because it was this weird but very real sense of kind of, I don't want to say this, I'm going to sound like a real kind of hippie, but reborn, a bit like a gift that was given to me through this seriously painful and horrible feeling. But on the other side of it, it was like, well, now you can go and understand yourself. When my mum passed away, the initial feeling was, of course, shock, like so many people feel. I'd lost family members before my mum. I'd lost grandparents. I was quite protected from the loss of them. But when my mum passed away, I don't think I changed much at all initially, but everything around me changed. And I remember just feeling, it was so surreal. It was just so strange. And I'd wake up in the middle of the night and I would have this feeling like, this just can't be. This can't be what's actually happened. And having no sense of grounding, I think that was my first proper realisation of what that means to be grounded. Any stability I had in my life already, as little as it may have been, almost just disappeared overnight. I just went back to college as normal. I was studying at the time in my last year of college, studying music. And then, so she passed away in the April. And by the end of that year, like the September, I moved through to Edinburgh and started uni, I just powered through with life. And I thought about not going to university and taking a year off. And I thought, well, what else am I going to do? What am I actually going to do? And my mum being such a dominant person, such a dominant personality, and definitely the sort of matriarch of my entire family. All the parties were at her house, all the arguments, she was in the middle of them. So she was really a matriarch, and that just disappearing as well meant the entire family dynamic changed. My dad went off and got a girlfriend really quickly within a couple of months, which I've read is a very common thing for widowers to do. But at the time I took it incredibly personally as a 19-year-old. And my brother moved out, my sister moved out, and everybody just scattered. Everything, the glue was my mum, although maybe perhaps that was part of the pain that she had, as she felt like she had to keep it all together. But I responded by not responding, I think, initially, and just trying to go about my life the way I would have if it hadn't happened. Although I'm saying that, I wasn't in denial either. I was very aware this is a thing and I should deal with this. This definitely will need to be inspected closely. But I didn't know how. I didn't know what to do, and I wasn't offered any support. No one in my life was getting professional help for anything mental health wise. No one even mentioned those words at the time. I mean, this is literally like you were still burning CDs and posting them to record labels kind of time. So just to give a timeline for anyone, I didn't know that I could have actually went and got help, but I didn't know to ask for any. When I realised that things were getting quite bad with my mental health, 100% through my behaviour, I'm someone that acts quite often as a way to understand how I feel. And I work really hard to try and reverse that now. But back then, I drank a lot. I drank every day pretty much through uni, which of course there's a cultural expectation. You're in uni, you're a student, it's all right to go out, or you're a party animal. I was also through in Edinburgh, and I was the only Glaswegian in my friendship group. So I kind of got this badge of being like the JK Glaswegian that drinks all the time. And my 21st birthday, I remember just getting really, 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 really smashed and spending a few days in bed with a terrible hangover and feeling rotten. And I do remember having this little, small, tiny voice that was saying, "This is what your mum done? Do you really think that this is okay? Is this actually how you want to feel? That's 3 days of your life. Do you want to feel like that?" But it was such a small, tiny voice. It actually came out as an emotion of shame more than anything else. I just felt really ashamed. Shame is a difficult emotion to understand and deconstruct. Quite often we just push it down and we continue with that behaviour. So that went through all the way till the age of 27. So the things that had happened in my life between that 21st birthday up to the age of 27 was I'd moved down to London, and I'd been in London for about 5 years. I'd been in a kind of string of long-term and sort of short-term relationships. One of the other places that I ran to heavily from a young age, from about the age of 12 onwards, was boys and relationships and men and sex. The way my mum would intensely mollycoddle me, I would intensely run towards these relationships. They made me feel safe. They made me feel in control. They made me feel like I had value. They gave me an opportunity to have a role as well. I was the caregiver in every relationship that I'd been in. I was the caregiver, and I was quite usually the dominant one, which is really interesting because my mum was so dominant. I always felt very passive as a young person. So I would totally reconstruct the relationship that I saw in my parents. Mum being dominant, my dad being a bit more passive and needing control. But those relationships would blow up so intensely, either just emotionally intensely, not necessarily dramatic, not like huge arguments or anything like that, just a lot of pain and a lot of kind of drawn out I know this isn't working, but I really don't know what else to do. And I would go from one relationship to the next. So by the time I got to the age of 27, I was single for the first time in a decade. I was just jumping from like one night stand to one night stand as well. And I was drinking a lot. And I got into this relationship that only lasted about 3 months. But it started through partying and alcohol, and it ended explosively through the police being called and my partner at the time being arrested for a domestic violence charge. And that was at the point that I lost my voice. My health started deteriorating, my physical health. That was at the point I thought, I'm depressed. I just had this almost clarity of depression, but this must be depression. This cannot be anything else. I absolutely hate waking up in the morning. Going for a shower it feels like somebody's asking me to rip a toenail out. Like I would do anything to not do it. But yet I was slapping on the makeup and doing a gig every single night of the week, going out partying afterwards. It was there when my voice left me, which is I'm a singer, to not have access to the major tool. I'm a singer and a talker. The major tool of communication that I have just left. And it was 6 months of chronic laryngitis. And I went to the doctor and I explained what was going on. And they just very pedantically went, that's depression. You've probably got a psychosomatic illness in your voice. We'll get you in for a scan just in case it's anything more. And it was just like, dun, dun, dun. Wow, man. I remember walking about after that in a total daze. That was when I realised things had got really bad, was when I couldn't even talk or sing anymore. That little tiny voice that I had at the age of 21 saying, is this really how you want to spend, 3 days of your life? That voice was really loud by this point. It was actually screaming at me. And I just thought, well, what is the options if I continue down this route? I can't work. So what happens when you live in London and your rent is £700 a month for a room and you work full time as a singer and you all of a sudden don't have your voice? So it was a big wake up call for sure. Once the doctor diagnosed depression, I was put on an NHS waiting list for psychotherapy, and the waiting list was 9 months long. I remember after that diagnosis retreating home to my dad's house. But at the time, me and my dad, we hadn't went through anything. We hadn't spoken about the truth behind what happened with my mum. We hadn't spoken about our relationship, but I still had this homing instinct, like I need to go home. So I remember going up to my dad's, getting the NHS phone call and getting told it's a 9-month waiting list. So in the meantime, if you feel like you want to end your life, phone this number. And I was so angry. I felt so fucking angry that was it. That was it. I was like, this is Great Britain. I know we're in Scotland, but if we're going down that route, surely we're better than this. But no, that was it. And I all of a sudden had this humility come over me, which was, if this is how I feel now, and this is me in whatever the year was at the time, like 2015, I think it was. Like, what about the people who all came before me with much more severe illnesses, much more severe traumatic experiences to try and understand? So anyways, once my anger subsided, coming back to kind of this personality trait that I think I developed as a young person because of my mum, I'm somebody that gets shit done and I rarely take no for an answer. I'm not a super loud, leery person. I'll squirrel away in the background harder and faster than any other people because I want to get it done. So I thought, right, well, if I'm going to need to wait 9 months for this NHS psychotherapy waiting list, that's not going to happen. That's not an option. What is option number 2? Who can I talk to now? How much will it cost and how can I afford it? I was still living in London. I went back down to London from Scotland after visiting my dad. I put a budget together and I said, right, well, I can afford with the money I've got just now to have at least 5 sessions private of psychotherapy. At the end of those sessions, I'll at least surely have a bit more of an understanding of what the fuck I'm supposed to do next. Because it really did feel like After coming out that doctor's surgery, getting diagnosed as depression, and it did feel like, what do I do next? And it's a big word, I think, for someone, like I said at the time, that hadn't really dealt with anything to do with their mental health. I was just left with this heavy bag on my back, doing a lot of research and Googling it and all this stuff coming out. You're just swamped. So I made the appointment. I found an amazing psychotherapist in London. I'd only been living there for a number of months, and my flatmate at the time confided in me that she was seeing a therapist and she'd been feeling really depressed. And I almost felt like this sense of relief, having a human in front of me who not only had the diagnosis of the big depression word, but also was living with it, doing something about it, talking about it. Wow, I was like, you are literally the first human being that I've really talked to about this and understands it. I booked the same therapist that she had, which was, I thought at the time, I was like, is this weird? My flatmate seeing the same person, but it was absolutely fantastic. She was so professional. I'd never experienced a professional relationship like that before, that was very, very boundary based. No shaking hands, no cuddles high by or anything, even though I was going to this person's house to talk about my inner, most deepest, most shameful thoughts and feelings. And it was like, right, your time's up, get out. And I was like, oh fuck, that's a thing. Boundaries are a thing, okay. So that was an amazing experience for me, was to actually get in and have my first ever psychotherapy session, where I was being asked questions that I didn't know the answers to, but I knew that I had to find those answers. And to do that was going to be really painful. Since initially starting psychotherapy, I had about a year's worth of psychotherapy before I left London. And since then, I've had ups and downs, and I've certainly had dips in my mental health. But the one thing that has been really consistent has been my sense and continual growth of self-awareness when it comes to my mental health. After that initial kind of few sessions of therapy, I came back to Scotland. I made the choice to change my environment because I'd identified that the environment within which I was living was drastically impacting my mental health. Living in London, in a city that I really can honestly say I did not make any friends in. I lived there for 5 years, and I don't talk to anyone that I met there at all. And no one talks to me. And it's not like we had bad relationships or anything. It just, the environment was so toxic. It was so transient. It was so based around who you are and what you can offer another person. And this constant movement, this just constantly being in motion and never stopping. I realised that environment was really not conducive to me being a happy person, that I had been fleeting and flighting about my whole life. I'd been running about after my mum and away from feelings and towards men and towards alcohol and away from just peace, that I needed to start that journey. But obviously I was still suffering from really poor mental health, and I was just at the very cusp of this understanding. So I started a new relationship right at the end of my time in London, and I knew in the back of my head, I knew, don't do this. You don't need this. This is not the time to be starting a new relationship with someone. There's no way you fell madly in love with this boy. You just met him like 2 weeks ago. And I brought it up to Scotland with me as the dominant person in the relationship. It was a bit of I feel horrible thinking back. I feel very guilty about a lot of this, but it was a bit of an ultimatum. So my partner moved up to Scotland with me, moved out of my dad's house with me, and really did give up a lot of his life. Now I would look at that and say, dude, what are you doing? Be your own person. It's totally cool, man. Like, well, if it's meant to be, it's meant to be. But back then it was like, look, you do this or we don't do anything, we don't do any of it. It actually lasted quite a little while, but it ended horribly. It ended with my partner cheating on me, but not because of any other reason other than they needed a way out, and it was really hard to talk to me as a partner, and so they took a really easy way out, you could argue. It's a very end of relationship form of behaviour quite often. So that breakup was the most painful breakup I've ever experienced, but only because I was a bit more self-aware by then, only because I kind of understood a little tiny bit of my own limiting beliefs, conditions of worth, my own behaviour. That was what was most painful. It was, I knew that this wasn't good. I knew this shouldn't have happened. And here's the, smell the coffee, like you can't run away from this now. So that was when I started my second round of psychotherapy in Scotland. And it was a huge dip. I was in bed for like 2 weeks and I was suffering badly. I still wasn't aware fully of what was going on, but my toes were in the water of this. And I knew that psychotherapy could help because I'd had an experience before. And I was in there for a year, psychotherapy, that second time round. And that was amazing because I walked into that room and I was like, here's my project. I was like, I'm a bit fucked with XYZ. I keep running towards men. I keep running into relationships. I keep drinking. I keep ending up in arguments with people when I'm drunk. And I know that there's another way. I know that this doesn't need to be the way I live my life, but I can't stop doing it. Going to help me. And going in with that objective and also being able to say to a therapist, to a total third party professional, like, this is my behaviour and I feel ashamed of it. And them to sit down and go, let's unpick that. Wow, that was like weirdly exciting. It was so painful, and I would leave those sessions in tears and I would be fucking exhausted. I would go home, I'd lie on the couch, and my dad, bless him, 70-year-old, but he's on his journey too. I would come out of this therapy session, I'd be so exhausted, I'd be sweating, I'd lie on the couch, but I just need to go for a nap. And he would be like, what's wrong? He just wouldn't understand what I just went through, which is in and of itself an experience of therapy, is that you are the only person that can do it. No one can jump inside you and put you back together. You need to pick up those broken pieces and find the shapes that they all fit together in. And it might be a brand new shape. It might not have been what was smashed in the first place, but you can put it back together. That was a big dip, was that relationship ending. But within those dips, for me, that is truly where the insight into myself comes from. The places that I feel the most pain are the places that I need to walk towards the fastest. It can be really hard to think about yourself as this beautiful work in progress that is constantly evolving. And as such, you're going to have stretch marks and scars, and they are just hallmarks of your being alive. When I think about those dark days that my mum had, that if only I could give the gift of that to her, and that insight and that self-awareness that therapy can really help you develop, I think she would still be alive. When I was younger and my mum passed away, I was in college, so I was in state-run education, and they were aware of what had happened. I feel like something should have been in place then. Students are governed by, health and safety standards and educational standards and human rights as well standards. What about your sense of well-being? What about the holistic nature of being a young person in full-time education? We see it all the time. There's so many amazing third sector organisations that exist in Scotland to interject in those young people's lives, because those young people maybe have a really difficult home life and maybe abuse or alcoholism or addiction, whatever it is. It needs to be rolled out in a much wider sense. I think Scotland is really making steps towards that, and definitely talking about mental health at the government level a lot more than I see the UK government do it. However, implementation is truly, that's the way that it must be measured. So I think that grief counselling should have been offered to my dad. My dad struggled immensely, still does struggle a lot with what happened. He was married to my mum for 31 years and had 4 kids and lived in the same house. That was his entire life, and that just disappeared. And as a result, we were all impacted by his grief and by his the difficulties that he had coping. So his behaviours, essentially, the way it all came out, impacted us, and it maybe didn't have to be that way. The voice I would have wanted to have heard when I was at my absolute lowest. I think being given permission to be your own person, and that you exist as an individual within a collective, that I lived for so long believing that I was only lovable if I was useful, that I was only lovable if I provided a service or had a purpose, like a girlfriend or a daughter, or I could help someone. It's the only time I felt I had love. I would love to go back and say to that young 20-something-year-old crying on the floor that it's okay for you to feel this pain for you and you alone. You don't need to always put your pain in the context of other people. It can be yours. You're allowed to stand up on your own 2 feet and look at yourself and say, I'm totally lovable and I'm worth love. And so I love myself, because I didn't have that forever. Up until really recently, and I mean very recently, could I actually say I love myself. So that was an alien concept back then. There's a difference between what advice you would give and what you would absorb and truly, through lived experience, believe. And I do think, although it's a beautiful thing to think back and say, what would I say to her that would help? I'm here today and I feel so good. I feel like life is a big adventure and a really beautiful, gorgeous one. So I look at those moments where I was at my absolute lowest and think, I wouldn't be here right now feeling how I am without them. However, some assistance definitely would have helped and perhaps nudged me in the right direction a little bit sooner.
Remember more, improve your focus, and multitask better. Hum is a brain sharpener that helps you do all three. Hum's wearable boosts your working memory and will be available in late 2021. Sign up to be notified when Hum launches and to learn more about the science behind Hum at thinkhum.com. That's thinkhum.com. Hum is designed for healthy adults and should not be used if you're pregnant, have cognitive impairment, implanted devices, or a history of seizures. The Hum patch is not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent disease. To learn more, go to thinkhum.com.
Look, staying healthy isn't easy. Watching your diet, hitting the gym, avoiding stress. But a good night's rest helps boost your overall health and wellness. And it couldn't be easier. The new Sleep Number 360 Smart Bed is the only bed that effortlessly adjusts and responds to both of you. The result? You wake up ready for anything. Proven quality sleep is life-changing sleep. And now, the new Queen Sleep Number 360 P5 Smart Bed is only $17.99. Save $600. Only for a limited time. To learn more, go to sleepnumber.com.
That was Rosie's story. When this podcast goes out, it will be the last of 2020. Whilst I feel the podcasts are in ways inapplicable to timelines because of the focus on feelings, struggles, experiences and more, I felt this was a good one to end a very difficult year for many with. Rosie is a fiercely philosophical and spiritual person. She looks for the good in everything, and one of her many qualities is taking a bad experience or struggle, looking at it and moving on. This potentially comes from the journey that she's been on. I know what it's like to have an alcoholic parent. It's a very strange period of existence. When Rosie says that she didn't know her mother was an alcoholic for 19 years, it's something I relate to deeply. As children, we learn from our parents and our environments, so to experience the myriad of personalities, actions and emotions from someone you hold in such high regard just makes you think it's normal life. It's often bewildering at times. I really understand what Rosie says about the sober parent and not perhaps remembering their actions, and your own being adapting to that, whether it be searching for devotion, questioning pain or abuse, or understanding if things were as bad or as good as you thought they were. I will probably never really know what the loss of a child feels like, and Rosie's mother losing her sister and then gaining her must have been one of the most contradictive things to have in her life. The polar emotions she must have experienced are not something I am able to fully understand, and without properly working through these experiences, it's another story of how pivotal generational experiences are. Rosie's path of self-destruction will be familiar to a lot of us. Is it fair, though, to call it destruction, or is it a means to try to block out the memories, negativity, and actively try and promote some kind of euphoria in your own life? As Rosie says, though, she had a tiny voice reminding her of her mum. This is something that a lot of people who have lived in these environments relate to. Alcohol can take over your life in a strange and dangerous way. It removes inhibitions, but it promotes sadness, shame, and in many cases, complete depression. Without having the knowledge of what she was going through when it came to mental health, then the pushing down that Rosie speaks about when it came to that voice of concern was inevitable. Rosie is another person who hit rock bottom before seeking help, but in this case, it was her physical health that promoted her to see her GP. And this ties into how we view mental health, especially when it's intergenerational. When we look back at previous generations, physical health is a thing that would promote seeking treatment. It could be argued that it was a blessing that Rosie did lose her voice, otherwise how long would it have been before something gave? One of the most important things that Rosie says on this podcast for me is that she didn't know to ask for help. This in itself is one of the main reasons that many don't seek help in the first place. They don't understand the feelings they are experiencing. They think it will maybe pass and perhaps brush it off. This again comes back to education and how imperative it is to teach these feelings from a young age in an open and safe environment. The reason I felt this was an important podcast to end such a tough year for so many is that Rosie shows the real positives that can come later in life when it comes to mental health. Therapy helped change her life. Understanding her boundaries, her self-awareness and what she was experiencing made her thrive as a person. As she says, it was like 2 lives and her being almost reborn. The way she talks about how she has embraced her lived experiences and the acute pain surrounding them is remarkable. She is an ambassador when it comes to how vital therapy is, how vital it is to talk about your struggles, and how vital it is to show yourself compassion and love. Whilst Rosie is unable to give her mother the help I know she perhaps wishes she had herself, I know for a fact that she has helped countless others. Her selflessness, her giving nature, and her role as a carer is far healthier now. She does it from a place of want as opposed to her seeking the reason for her existence. She is one of the teachers I am glad to have in my life, and she's someone that I respect greatly. I'm so happy she found her voice again, because it's created an impact that is needed and a new life for her that I hope continues to bring her happiness. If you have experienced or experiencing anything described in this episode, you will find support information in the text with this podcast. A Sonic Hug podcast is recorded, produced and edited by me, Halina Rafai. We are also part of Scotland's podcasting network, The Big Light. Until next time, deep breaths.
Look, staying healthy isn't easy. Watching your diet, hitting the gym, avoiding stress. But a good night's rest helps boost your overall health and wellness. And it couldn't be easier. The new Sleep Number 360 Smart Bed is the only bed that effortlessly adjusts and responds to both of you. The result? You wake up ready for anything. Proven quality sleep is life-changing sleep. And now, the new Queen Sleep Number 360 P5 Smart Bed is only $17.99. Save $600. Only for a limited time. To learn more, go to sleepnumber.com.